The Everything PT podcast is sponsored by Vald Performance. Vald is the creator of the airbands for blood flow restriction therapy. If you are looking to stay up to date with today's post-surgical modalities and adding VFR to your clinic, please visit valdperformance.com.
This podcast is sponsored by CSMI, the maker of the HUMAC Norm isokinetic system. Purchase a new or refurbished machine, or you can even upgrade an existing system to bring it up to date with all the latest testing and training applications. Please visit csmisolutions.com to view all of their available products, including the HUMAC Norm isokinetic system, the HUMAC Balance portable computerized balance system, and Sportswear Online. CSMI, better data leads to better results.
Hello, and welcome to the Everything PT podcast with Matt Taylor and Daniel Bodkin. Please do not consider anything you hear to be medical advice. Just a couple of guys ranting about everything PT. Enjoy the show. Hello again. Welcome to the Everything PT podcast. Daniel, this is episode 23, is it? I think
It is 23.
it's crazy. We got like 30 more to get to that 52 mark. So
Yeah,
something like that.
Plugging away.
Yeah. So we have a guest today, and pretty excited about our guest. And she's with the Air Force, and I'm super excited to get her perspective today. And you guys both have some military background training, so it's going to be a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So I will introduce her. This is Jessica Tyson. Jessica. Oh, you're not Jessica Tyson. You're Jessica San Felippo. Oh my gosh, I forgot totally. But that's so crazy. I was in their wedding, Daniel.
Oh wow.
How long has it been? Has it been 10 years?
Oh my gosh, almost 10 years.
It's been almost 10 years. So.
Mhm.
It used to be Tyson. Now it's San Felippo. Sorry, Dominic, if you're out there listening. But Jess, thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do within our field here?
Absolutely. So I'm Jess. Went to grad school with Matt Taylor here. So we go way back. So I am an Air Force physical therapist. I'm going on about 10 years in the military, and then specifically the Air Force. I have never experienced working in the civilian setting. So straight out of grad school, I commissioned in my second year of PT school, and then went straight into the military. I spent time at initially Keesler Air Force Base working with tech school students, combat controllers, dependents, retirees. There was an outpatient setting and an acute care setting. Worked with flight medicine there to develop a student trainee clinic. And so I worked with a lot of the training students coming through their tech school at Keesler in Mississippi. And then I interviewed for a special operations unit up at Fort Bragg, where I worked with elite flyers. So aircrew, pilots, load masters, radio operators, and I was a physical therapist embedded with this team. So learned a lot of the special operations world, worked with some other elite units in different branches. And then the Air Force Academy reached out to me and said, hey, you are one of the 5 dual credentialed PTs in the Air Force. We would like to send you to kind of groom you for a faculty position out at the Academy. And so they are sending me back through the University of Florida Doctor of Athletic Training program to develop me a little bit further. So I'm in my 3rd year of the DAT program at UF.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And you and Daniel obviously have a tremendous amount in common, both athletic training, both physical therapists, both in the armed services too. So that's incredible.
I shot rockets out of tanks.
Oh,
like the most
way cooler than what I do.
job that you could have in the Army other than, infantry though. They showed me, I actually went in to be a combat engineer, and they showed me a video of shooting rockets from tanks, and they waved a little cash bonus in front of me. So I took it, but I loved it. It was fun.
Absolutely. I never got to do anything that cool. I just rehabilitate the people who do the cool things. That's what I do.
Which is cool.
So here's the thing, right? I was on an old Cold War weapon system, the M270. You can look it up. It's really cool. It's a tank with a box of rockets on the back. but they were like 20 years old when I was in, and that was 20 years ago. So they were constantly breaking down. So the majority of your time was spent, anytime you would drive the thing or do anything, something would break. So most of your time was actually spent fixing what broke.
I feel like that's similar to aircraft too, right? Like you spend about the same amount of time on maintaining the aircraft as you do actually flying it. Seems pretty consistent there.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it with our athletes or with our, military people, same thing. You go out, you hurt something, you got to, rehab and maintain them too.
Absolutely. Yep.
So Jess, your caseload, is it similar? Do you have a lot of amputees, a lot of traumatic kind of stuff, like from combat or from crashes or things of that nature?
So I will say in my 10 years, I have not worked with an amputee. And I think that may be a common thought that a lot of people have when you're working with military. So you're going to see combat wounds, you're going to see traumatic brain injuries, you're going to be working, everybody has PTSD. You're always going to be working with the amputees. And that's not necessarily the case. I think it depends on what setting you're in, right? So if you're working with elite Army forces, right, they put millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably close to $1 million in each operator, right? So they go through a ton of training to the point where if they lose a limb, they're probably going to try to retain that person and rehabilitate them and get them back into the fight if they're willing to. And that's when you're going to be working with amputees, traumatic wounds, things like that. Okay. Whereas maybe in different scenarios, like I worked in tech school training. So if you think about people coming out of basic training, right, they kind of get broken down in basic training. You're going to see your typical stress fractures, overuse injuries, tendonitis, plantar fasciitis, that kind of a lot of lower extremity overuse issues in a training setting versus, kind of when you get to the elite special operations, you may see more of those like traumatic issues. And so it just depends on if you're embedded with a team and you're working with a specific population, or if you're working in more of an outpatient setting where you see all the different populations on the base. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're seeing like 18 to 20 patients a day, double booked, like the rest of the outpatient world then, right?
No. So no, and what's nice,
Just
and
kidding.
I know we'll probably get to this at some point, but in the military, we don't do insurance, right? We don't bill. We still document and we code, but we do not do any billing to insurances. I think, again, depending on the setting that you're in and which hospital you're working in, which is really nice because we can see people for one visit and we've met their goals in one visit, or I can see you for up to a year, as many times as I feel like is necessary.
Wow.
And I don't have to worry about the insurance side of things. Obviously, fraud, waste, and abuse, we're not abusing the system, but if I feel like you need that amount of care to get you back to your baseline or optimize your performance, insurance isn't necessarily holding us back from doing that.
That is a world of PT bliss there, I think.
I know, right? No insurance.
Yeah.
I know when I was in active duty, it was almost a stigma of being injured. Let's say you twisted your ankle, hurt your back, hurt your knee. A lot of times, I was combat arms, but you usually wouldn't want to go to sick call to get it checked out because you were worried about not only the stigma, people saying, you're faking it or you're just shamming, you're trying to get away from doing, normal fitness training in the morning. But there comes a point where you're not ready. You're not able to perform your task. So how do you balance out? Let's say you have somebody just like a meniscus tear with their knee. They're not able to do their work. So are they on like a special duty kind of assignment? Or are they like dedicated to, hey, my job is rehabbing, 6-8 hours a day?
Mm-hmm. So that is a loaded question because it totally depends on, again, what setting you're working in and what population you're working with. And I think the personality of the multidisciplinary human performance team, right? The different personalities working on that team, the relationship that they have with their commanders, and what opportunities you want for your people. So I guess the big difference for me, and I can speak to the experience side of things, and when I was working with tech school students, it's slap a Band-Aid on it. And if they want to stay in training, they're going to stay in training. And we're just going to, treat the symptoms and hope you make it through training. And there were some tech school students who were like, I just want to be injured and get out of this. And, honestly, we don't want those people in the military. You can get out when you're early in training, like go, do something else. But when you're at a point like in special operations, when you get to those elite units, they've invested so much time and money into your training. And so I think they try a little bit harder to work with you when you're injured. So for us, I worked with AFSOC, Air Force Special Operations Command, and we had one guy who ruptured his Achilles while he was downrange, while he was overseas. And he came back and we sent him to get really an intense rehabilitation down at Exos in, where is it? Pensacola, maybe? Somewhere in Florida. I can't remember where Exos is. But that was his job. That was his full-time job, was you're rehabilitating for 8 hours a day during the week. And when you come back to us, like you're going to be deployable. You're going to be ready to deploy. And so I think it just depends. It depends on what level you're at in the military, your relationship with your commanders, what your career projection is. And then they're usually willing to work with you. So if you're injured, so pilots, if they get injured and they can't fly, they're probably going to fly a desk for a while, and they're just going to do evaluations and scheduling, maybe go to like some PME, like professional military education, stuff like that. So they usually work with you. It just depends on what level you're at. I hope
there's always logistics in every unit. So that was the thing. You got hurt, you worked with, it was the headquarters unit, you got sent to them. Right. But, something to think about too is you're not promotable, or, if you have an injury, it can really affect your promotion status. And if you're somebody who's thinking, hey, I want to ride this out for my career, going through, I'll just throw it back to meniscus, going through a meniscectomy, that can, slow you down, but yet it's something that if you don't get it taken care of in the long term, it can slow you down even worse. So, it's a very delicate balance with that.
I think it was really tough with air crew too, because they want to fly. Like they want to be on flight status. If you take them off of flight status, they are very unhappy. So they will hide injuries and issues from the medical team. And it is that same stigma. Like, I'm not going to see medical, they're going to take me off of flying status. So when you go into these units, you really have to build up a rapport and be like, I'm not trying to take you out of the fight. I'm trying to keep you in the fight, but we can address these issues when they are so small. And just like a little annoyance, instead of getting to the point where, you can't function and you can't sit on the floor and even play with your kids at the age of 40 because it hurts too bad. You know what I mean? So it's tricky. And from my personal experience, it's been really tricky with air crew trying to do that. But
looking for a way to improve sport-specific training with your athletes? Then you have to check out Blaze Pods. Blaze Pods is a neurocognitive reaction training intervention that can be incorporated into your sessions for patients throughout the treatment spectrum. Visit blazepod.com, enter code EVERYTHINGPT at checkout, and save 15% off your order today. Hey, all you rehab specialists out there, do you have an isokinetic dynamometer just sitting around your clinic not being used? Little known fact, isokinetic machines that aren't used regularly are at higher risk for bouts of sadness. Help your machine out and take CSMI's newest CEU course, Isokinetics 101 online, created by me, Daniel Bodkin, and learn how to use all the exercise and testing applications available on your machine. With new and exciting rehab techniques in your toolbox, your sad isokinetic machine can become an active member of the rehab team again and regain its happiness. Isokinetics 101 online by CSMI has been approved for 8 credit hours for athletic trainers, physical therapists, and physical therapy assistants. Contact your state board for details on specific requirements. This course is available at humacnorm.com/courses/isokinetics-101.
So Jess, would you consider yourself like an orthopedic generalist kind of thing, or you treat whatever walks in the door for the Air Force kind of thing, or what's that look like for you?
So I would say like MSK expert. I think PTs in the military are kind of, and athletic trainers, honestly, are seen as kind of the MSK experts. And it's encouraged when you are active duty Air Force PT to get your orthopedic certification. So your OCS, and they will actually fund you. If you pass the test, they'll reimburse you for that, which is awesome. So it's encouraged that you do that. And then the fellowship out at the academy is for a tactical fellowship, but that's supposed to prepare you to do your SCS. So there are some options, but I think in general, PTs are kind of seen as like the MSK experts on the medical team.
Yeah, very cool. Right. I mean, it's a good spot for them, I think.
Yeah. On brand.
All right. So I have a question, right? Let's say I have, we have a first year, PT student listening, or an athletic training student, or even somebody who's been out for a year, and they're like, wow, that sounds like a pretty sweet deal. How does somebody even get started with a career in the Air Force?
So I usually give the advice that I think if you are contemplating any military, that you should find an internship opportunity or some observation on a base. And that can be contacting your local base. There are Navy, Army, Air Force bases, at least a base probably in every single state. I may be wrong about that, but probably. And there are a couple, I know specifically Air Force PT. I don't know if it's still there, but there was one down at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. There was an outpatient internship program there. And then out at Travis Air Force Base in California, Northern California, there was an internship program out there. And there may be a couple other ones specifically for PT. So I would recommend observing and talking to an airport or a military PT, even if they're a contractor or GS positions, which is a government civilian position. Just understanding the job and talking to those people and seeing if it's a good fit for you. And then if you're really serious about it and you just want more information, you can reach out to your healthcare professions recruiter, and you can find it on, I could probably, if you guys do show notes for this, I can always give you the actual link for it, but it's something / find a recruiter. But you can look for a healthcare professions recruiter and make sure it's specific to healthcare professions, because they will understand if there's bonuses involved with PT, like if PTs are in demand in the Air Force specifically or in the military, they'll be able to tell you that. And there may be a bonus for signing on. That wasn't around when I applied 10 years ago, but that may be different because we are in demand. And I think out of the entire medical system right now, PTs are continuing to increase in the Air Force, whereas other medical positions are actually decreasing right now.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I honestly don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think, so I know that they're putting a like human physical performance team with every flying unit, and that may have something to do with it. So they're trying to increase the number of PTs that are embedded with actual units instead of just being in like outpatient settings. They're trying to increase the number that's specifically with a team.
Gotcha.
I know the Marines were already doing that when I was going through athletic training. They already had, athletic trainers in Marine units, out in the field. And I always thought that was, really cool. And it was like the perfect fit.
Yeah. So the Marine Corps and the Navy love athletic trainers. And they've been using athletic trainers longer than the other branches.
Awesome. What percentage of PTs do you feel like become therapists within the armed services, Jess?
You mean what?
Got to be 1 or less, like how many PTs, I probably didn't say that very well. How many PTs end up going to the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and being a physical therapist for them? It can't be. I don't know anyone.
I think I'd have to know the national numbers of PTs, but I don't even know that. But I think we only have, when I joined 10 years ago, we only had like 119 Air Force PTs. So okay. 119. So I would say you're probably close to one, maybe less than 1% of PTs actually join specifically the Air Force. But yeah. I'm sure the Army has more PTs than we do.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of therapists out there. There's 1,600 licensed therapists in the state of West Virginia.
Alone. Yeah.
And that's a tiny state.
That's a small.
Small. So it's a small percentage.
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious about that. What were you going to say something, Daniel? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was probably going to ask the same question you were, so you can go ahead.
So, Jess, it's a hot topic with diagnostic imaging coming up, just to change gears here. So what is it like, ordering x-rays, CTs, MRIs? Can you talk us through situations where you do and you don't, for things like that? Because we're seeing, I think 5 states now within the US have the ability for their therapists to do that. And it's coming. And I'm just starting to gather information about it.
So I'm actually really excited about that. I think
Good.
as the MSK experts, I think we should have the privileges to do that. However, I think that we need to be better educated on it, and have the opportunities to be better trained on it. Because when I joined the Air Force, they gave me those privileges and I did not feel prepared at all to be able to do those things. But throughout time, and again, building rapport with your team and practice and talking to radiologists and talking to nuclear medicine, you learn, I guess, best practices. And then in the Air Force, within your first year, they try to, after you go through officer training in October, they try to have you in the military musculoskeletal residency program in January. So you go through a residency program with them, which is through correspondence, where you get a little bit more education and evidence-based practice with imaging. But I ordered a lot of imaging earlier on in my career until I really learned the ins and outs of it and learned what was appropriate versus not appropriate.
Sure.
In the military, though, and I think it just depends on, I guess, what base you're on, and again, what your team's experience is, so what your medical team's experience is, because a lot of people, so for me, I can't just order an MRI and they just get an MRI. They will always order x-rays first. They always have to get an x-ray first. No matter what you think would be the most appropriate sensitivity, specificity wise, like they will always do an x-ray first. And so
Sure.
So we do an x-ray first and then we do an MRI. But what's cool is, and I'm sure that PTs will do this all over the place, is if you are unsure of what to order, you just call up the radiologist and say, hey, I'm looking for this. What's the best imaging to use? What should I order? And then they'll usually coach you through it. Again, if you have a good team and they're responsive to you ordering imaging. But also in my last unit, I worked right alongside flight surgeons. So sometimes I would just sit down and ask them like, hey, I'm thinking that this guy has, this issue, what should we order? What should we do? Do we need to order labs? Because you can also, as a PT in the military, you are a privileged provider. So you can order lab work, you can refer to any specialties, you can prescribe some medications like muscle relaxers or anti-inflammatories, and you can order imaging as well. So you have a lot of autonomy. Of autonomy.
I just feel like that's the way physical therapy should be. I really do. I mean, insurance is not a factor. You can order labs. I mean, this is stuff that we've been educated on with the DPT too. Granted, we probably should have had more than just a lab on, radiographs and reading a 1 4-hour lab on that. But I do everything you're saying. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Because we've gone through all of that painful, grueling education. What do you think, Dan?
No, I totally agree with you. It'd be nice to have. I'm just wondering, just for you, let's say, in general, whenever we think somebody needs imaging in the civilian world, it's typically like you try it out first. You give them, 4 to 6 weeks of rehab just to see how far you can get before you move to that imaging phase. Like, is there anything like within your company's policy that's similar to that? Or is it just as your discretion?
It's discretionary. So, and it comes with, it's dependent on which unit you're with, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go back to talking about working in tech school, I am not quick to order imaging at all, unless I'm really thinking it's a stress fracture. And then I'm like, okay, you probably need a bone scan because it's the cheapest option. I'm not going to order you an MRI yet, unless it's pretty severe. But so in a training setting, it's different. If you really have to rule something in or rule something out. And then if you're talking about special operations, again, or if they're close to retirement, if they develop back pain within 3 weeks of retiring, I'm probably going to order imaging, especially if it was caused by their job, because if they retire and they can't get disability because of that, you know what I mean? So again, it just depends. Typically though, I mean, if we think about the natural history of back pain, I'm not going to order imaging early unless there are significant red flags, right? And even then, if they've had back pain for maybe 6 weeks and they've done all the right things, they're checking the boxes and it's not getting any better. Okay, let's talk about it. If you have to deploy, if you're going away for training, like I might expedite some of those things so we can just get people taken care of so that they can execute the mission. But I am not one to be quick about imaging, and I know everybody practices differently, and that's fine. And if they think that imaging is required and they just want it in their medical records, okay. But I'm not very quick to order imaging immediately for anything.
Sure. I heard you mention nuclear medicine earlier. That's what my undergrad degree is in. And I'm just like, it's like the first time it has ever come up too. Cause like I did not enjoy the field and handled radiation for a living, for a year or so or two. And I was like, I can't do this long term. So, but the bone scan for a stress test. Yes. Good to hear you mention that. I appreciate it.
Jess, I have a question about your athletic training program you're in.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-year program, correct?
So it is technically a 2-year program. So I've met all the class requirements, but the 3rd year is kind of an internship opportunity specifically for what I'm being groomed for. And so I'm hanging out with the sport performance and analytics guy and the athletic director for sports medicine, I believe is the title. But
so talk to me a little bit about how you balance out practice with that program. Now, are you fully in the athletic training program and you're out of the clinic right now, or is it a mix?
So I did some volunteer work as an athletic trainer because I'm licensed in West Virginia, but I'm not a licensed PT in Florida. And I'm a military PT. So unless I am working through a military treatment facility, I can't practice PT. So I'm a licensed athletic trainer in Florida. It gets confusing, but so I did some work with the ROTC detachment on campus last year as their athletic trainer. But as far as PT, I have been out of practice for the last 2 years.
Okay. Did you do athletic training as undergraduate?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yep. And I never actually took my test until a couple of years ago. And then I finally came back and took my certification exam. And I was like, it's about time. I should have done it a long time ago.
That is a difficult test right there. I would honestly I would say that I was more stressed out about that exam than I was the PT exam.
Oh, I think I was opposite. But I had also taken the athletic training exam after being in practice for 8 years.
Yeah.
So I felt a little bit more comfortable taking it. But
certainly.
Jess, just back to the imaging, because I feel like we're going to see this more and more and more in the future. Any thoughts on how we should maybe revise the educational system? Because I think the model that you have there in the Air Force is incredible for being a very autonomous, independent. I think that's what the APTA is after. You know what I mean? And I think you embody it currently very, very well. So any thoughts on what we should do to try to capture that? Because I'm having a hard time helping.
Yeah, I really just think talking about it more and practicing with different modalities. So how they do it here in the AT program is repetition, right? You look at things, if it's a T1, T2 weighted MR, what's proton density, like things like that. And it's just repetitive. So you know what you're looking at. But then just learning, like, I think that they should bring in radiologists or guest speakers in that field to then educate. Maybe they could educate specifically physical therapists on common things that they see and what to look for on imaging.
Sure.
So I think having a course specifically dedicated to radiology would be ideal because there's so many new, like I know CT scans have come a long way, right? And so I think imaging is just expanding, and like diagnostic ultrasound, oh my goodness.
Yes.
Let's train on this stuff. I think it should be more embedded in our education because especially with direct access clinics, and how many states are direct access now? Do you know? I don't know.
A lot, a majority of them, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
But with that, right, like we can have these diagnostic capabilities, and we should have more autonomy if you're a direct access clinic. So yeah, I think just practice, especially diagnostic ultrasound, that's too easy, right? Well, easy.
Should be.
If you're trained on it, properly, it can be a very easy tool to use in your clinic space and very inexpensive and non-invasive. So, I think, just repetition and even having just coursework specifically dedicated, not just 1 to 2 classes. Like I think it should be a separate course in itself. But
my mind kind of goes to like therapists in school going and being with a radiologist for a rotation for 4 to 6 weeks. That would make a lot of sense.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Just thinking out loud about it. Cause I think we need some reform quickly. Our field needs to figure out what it does and then do it very well. Cause we're not really sure of anything, seems like.
So we went through school, what, 10 years ago now?
Oh
We
gosh.
graduated 10 years ago. So wild, a decade ago.
Yeah.
But I don't remember doing a lot of imaging. Do you?
We didn't. We did some. We had some radiographs, some lighted, background play hung up on the wall, but very little. It was picking out fractures, basically.
Okay.
I mean, who can't see the line in a radius or, boxer's fracture or whatnot? But
right. No, I think the idea of observing and spending time with a radiologist, not just even one time, but doing a rotation with them, would be amazing, because then you can learn the language, which will then help you build rapport for other radiologists that you would potentially work with. You can learn the language, and then they can talk to you specifically about, musculoskeletal things that you might see in the clinic space.
Absolutely. Hey, you mentioned diagnostic ultrasound, and I'm just hijacking all the questions here. Sorry. But what are some things that you use that for, like tendinopathy? I know there's some good tendinopathy research with diagnostic ultrasound, but what are your thoughts?
So you can use it with arthrocentesis if we ever get around to that point, doing like joint injections or like joint irrigation type stuff.
Okay.
Arthrocentesis.
You're able to do that? You're doing injections?
No.
Okay.
Not yet, but
I mean, I do them on the side, but that's different.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are a few off the record. There are a few physical therapists who are able to do that in the military, but it just requires supervision and, working with a doc who is able to do that and all that fun stuff. But awesome. I mean, swelling, you can look for muscle tears, tendinitis-ish, like you can see swelling on there. I'm trying to think of other things that stress fractures.
Very cool.
So yeah, quite a bit.
Very cool.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I think our field should really get behind the imaging instead of dry needling or something or whatever it is where, in a tug of war match about, because I think that could be very beneficial in us becoming autonomous and having true direct access to our patients.
Right. That's why I think, like, if you are direct access, you should have a lot more autonomy so that you can then, screen your patients and make sure that they're getting the appropriate care, the appropriate diagnosis, but you need the tools to be able to do that.
Because out here in the real world, I have to have a signature on orders for, physicians for all Medicare patients, which account for 50% of our patient population. Okay. So we're dependent on that. And then I got insurance companies telling us how much therapy this poor Mrs. Smith who fractured her femur, needs to. And it's, it's just, you enjoy your PT life in the Air Force over there. Okay.
I really do. I am very grateful.
Well, I'm sure like with everything, there's always, a little bit of the good, a little bit of the bad. In every setting, it's a little different.
Sure.
So what are some of the negatives that you would say?
I will say one of my biggest pet peeves is when people are approaching retirement and they just try to collect as much disability as possible.
Oh, yeah.
That bothers me. I don't like the idea of people who don't really need that disability and that disability being taken away from somebody who actually needs it.
Yeah.
To enhance quality of life later on because of their injuries from service. So I will say that that's a downside. And then you'll get the occasional people who are trying to get out of physical fitness in the morning, right? Or trying to get on a profile so they don't have to take their fit test every year, 6 months.
I know they might not pass that
right.
run.
Yeah. Right. And then they come in and they're talking about something that doesn't really hurt. But so I would say those two things are some of the cons. Other things would be if you are active duty, I mean, you're uprooting your life every 3-4 years.
Yep.
Your supervisor changes every 2 to 3 years. So your environment changes, and then you may be under a different command structure, and then they dictate what you can do and can't do. So sometimes that can be a con, but then sometimes that's a pro. Because if you're working for a supervisor that you really don't like, you're like, all right, 2 more years and then we're out of here.
Peace.
Or, 2 more years and they're out of here. So I can do this. This is fine.
Well, you're 10 years into it, right?
Yes.
All right. So at what point do you become the supervisor in the military setting?
So I have previously, in my first at Keesler, at the tech school, I was considered an element leader. And so that's kind of like the basic, I oversaw a couple people, a couple of enlisted members, and 1 officer. And then at Fort Bragg, I was actually the human performance director, but then I became the flight commander and I oversaw the flight medical clinic.
Mm-hmm.
So I oversaw public health technicians and administrative folks and people giving immunizations. So I kind of oversaw all the flight physicals and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
As a PT, that's not super common, but that was my flight commander position. And now I'm just a student again, going in reverse. So at some point, everywhere along the way, whatever rank you are supervising somebody or supervising something. So
just to add on, you get to see a lot of the world that way too. I know you've been in Mississippi, right? I remember you guys being there in Biloxi and now in Florida. So it's pretty cool part of it.
You do, yeah. You get to see a lot of cool places.
Mm-hmm. What were we gonna say, Dan? Sorry.
I might get lucky and go to Oklahoma too. Everybody asks about, pay, if I'm looking at this job versus that job. So my question is, are you on the typical military pay schedule where it goes by your rank and your time in rank and time in service?
Yes. However, there are some differences. First of all, military benefits are amazing. So let's just put that out there. And then you get the GI Bill as well. Even though you have your terminal degree, like you take the GI Bill and you can either give that to one of your children, give that over to your spouse, or if you want to go back for another degree or other schooling, you can go back yourself. And it's on the military's dime. When I first applied, and I think within the first 2 years that I joined, I obviously had student loans, whoop-de-doo. But you can apply for the health professions, I wrote it down actually, health professions student loan repayment program. And they will pay a large chunk of your student loans back after you apply for it. I don't know of anybody who hasn't received that. Like I was able to do that within my first 1 to 2 years, and it didn't cover everything, but it was a very large sum. And that helped out a lot. And you just sign on for additional years in the military. I think it was like 2 or 3, but I'm not positive on that. And then if you have your OCS, I don't know if it's similar for SCS or not, or any other certifications, but I know if you have your OCS, you can apply for medical specialty pay, and you actually get another $500 a month for your specialty. And then you follow the normal military structure. What's different is that you don't come in as a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant. If you come in with your doctorate in physical therapy, you come in as a captain, right?
That's nice.
It's nice, but also terrifying because you're straight out of officer training school and they expect you as a captain to really just, know what you're doing and know how to supervise people. And that's not, for me, that was not the case. But you come in as a captain, which is obviously higher pay, higher ranking. And so you do follow the normal structure, but that means a pay raise every 2 years. And if you make rank, that's another pay raise. And so.
Yeah, I just finally just thinking of, whenever I'd see my lieutenants or my captain walking, from, like the motor pool back to the barracks or anything, anybody they go by, has to salute them and they'd have to salute back. And I'm just picturing in my head, what happens if they have a rotator cuff injury and they physically can't get to...
So what's funny is you can
Active assistance.
you can actually write profiles for that. So like if somebody wasn't able to do like customs and courtesies, they would have to carry their profile on them. So if an officer called them out, like, hey, you didn't salute, they're like, I can't. Hold up your sheet to them and be like, I physically can't salute you.
All right, dumb civilian question. Can you salute left-handed, or does it always have to be right? It's got to be
always
right.
right-handed.
Oh yeah, you screwed them.
No, there always was a rule. If that officer had, if they were carrying objects to where they physically couldn't, then you could get by without saluting them, or if you were physically carrying.
Yeah.
So just, give that profile, boxes to carry, anytime they
That's
walk.
it, right?
So
Carry
Jess,
something, they'll never know.
I hate to pin you down, and you don't have to use any real specific numbers for your pay, but can you give us a ballpark with pay for PT in the armed services? So I'm just curious, because I know the private practice, new grads are in our area, probably 70 to 75 to $80,000 in West Virginia. You go around Pittsburgh, that number goes down to 55 to 65 probably. So
Right. So that would probably be your starting base salary would be, I think, and you can look it up. If you look up military pay tables, you can look at O3, which would be a captain, and you would look at O3 captain with under 2 years of service. It'll give you your base salary. But what the base salary does not include is your housing allowance, which is on top of that.
Okay.
So they give you a monthly housing allowance that is based on the cost of living of where you are stationed. Right. So it would differ between Gainesville and like Minot, North Dakota, or Las Vegas and Minot, North Dakota. Right. So it would be different, but you get a basic housing allowance on top of your salary. Plus, what's the sustenance? You get like $200 to $300 for like basic living costs. If you're in a more hostile area, so if you deploy, you get your pay tax free, which is amazing.
And you also get money on top of that for being in that area.
Yes. Yep. So you get hostile pay, hostile allowance. You can get
dependents.
Dependents. Yep. You get more if you have dependents. I feel like there's so many healthcare. Right?
Yeah, healthcare, food.
You don't pay anything extra for your healthcare.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that adds up. That's way more than a base salary, and outside of the military.
Absolutely. So there are a ton of benefits that you don't see within just that. I mean, starting 50 grand at captain, and you're guaranteed. I mean, you're guaranteed a raise every 2 years too. I think initially I think it's every year for a couple of years, and then it goes to every 2 years. And then when you make rank, right, like you get another pay bump. And
and 30 days of paid leave a year.
Oh yes.
I mean,
how did I forget about that? And it carries over too.
I missed that.
It carries over. Nice. Yep. Not always. You do get use or lose at some point, but you can actually take quite a few of those days and carry them over to the following year. Wow. So 30 days of paid leave, and that's as soon as you start.
Okay. Now, obviously it's a big commitment. I know that much, right? Yeah. So how much are you committing to, like, when you sign the dotted line with the Air Force here?
It is different, and I believe it probably changes annually, but when I signed up, it was like 4 years of active duty and then 3 years reserve. But if you add anything additional, so like my schooling, I had to sign up for more years. My healthcare professions, loan repayment, I had to sign up for additional years. And to be honest, I don't even know how many years I have left. Just because it's been such a good experience. So I'm like,
well,
I've been every time super blessed. So I'm just like, we're just going to keep going, and hopefully they'll keep me till I retire.
And every time your contract comes up, you usually get another signing bonus for re-enlisting.
Yes. Yep.
All right. How many years are you in right now?
It'll be 10 in December.
So you're halfway to your 20-year retirement.
Halfway to my 20-year retirement.
All right. Had I stayed in, I joined at 19. Had I stayed in, I would have retired 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
That's insane. All the guys crazy. That I came in with that wrote it out, they're now retired.
And they have a pension, right?
Yeah, they have a pension, and now, they're figuring out who they are in the civilian world. It's kind of fun to see them go through that transition.
Yeah, that transition is wild, I'm sure.
Jess, your plan to stay in the Air Force for the 20 years or
that is
years?
My plan.
Yeah.
Yep. They've been really good to me and my family. Couldn't ask for anything better. It's a good career. And if you're willing to, sign your name on the dotted line, you're willing to sacrifice and move every 2 to 3 years, 4 years, if you're willing to deploy, if you need to, it's definitely a good place to be.
Okay. Is there, do you have to be lots of questions, I'm grilling you.
No, this is great.
Is there a certain, age? Is it, you can apply at any age, or is it you have to be like in your early 20s, mid 20s or something like that?
I'm thinking 35. I think it's 35 for our field. I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's 28. I think it might be 28 for some other fields, but
Gotcha.
I think for ours it's 35, but
'Cause
I
I
would
missed-
probably double check on that.
I missed the Navy SEAL deadline. I think
Oh,
it
yeah.
was a couple years ago. I'm 34, so that's out. It's gone for me. I honestly no, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that.
I would love to see you at Bud's training. That'd be awesome.
I can swim pretty good. It's
There
not
you
when
go.
someone's holding me under the water, but yeah.
I can't.
Anyway, Dan, do you have any more questions for Jess?
No, thank you for your service, your
Yeah.
continued service.
Thank you for yours.
Thank you for coming on today, because that's kind of like, if you know that there's PTs in the military, it's a big like mystery of how it works and, you know, how you get into it. And hopefully, you know, it'd be really cool if somebody's listening to this other than our parents and aunts. If somebody listens to this and they hear that and they think, wow, that's a really cool route. Then that's really beneficial that you came on to talk.
Absolutely. And I am fine if you guys give out my email too. People can reach out if they want to. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your email?
J San Felippo. So JSANFELIPPO @UFL.edu.
Yeah. And we'll put that in the show notes as well.
For sure. Awesome. Jessica, well, continue to be a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for meeting with us, and maybe we'll have you back on the show sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome.